He died 6 months after carving this message. A soldier. The Great War. Never came back. But what he carved underneath this bench stayed, hidden where no one looks, where thousands of people sat without knowing. If you're reading this, you came here to say something you're afraid to say. Say it anyway. He carved those words the night before leaving, after sitting with his father, after the goodbye that destroyed them both. And he wasn't the only one. Around his message, dozens more. Different decades, different hands, knife marks and pen scratches carved into what nobody sees. Ended it here. Worst day of my life. Told him the truth. Lost him. Worth it. She said no. I survived. Came out here. Terrified. Free. A secret history. A century of courage. All hidden under one bench. And today, right now, someone is walking toward this bench. Hand shaking. Heart racing. About to have a conversation that will change everything. They don't know about the messages underneath. Don't know they're about to repeat history carved by strangers. Don't know that 100 years of people sat exactly where they're about to sit. Afraid. Brave. Human. This is the story of the bench that holds secrets, and the people who left proof they were here. The park was established at the end of the 1800s. Trees planted, paths laid, pond dug by hand. The bench was installed in the early 1900s. Spring, under a young oak tree, facing the pond. Simple construction, wooden slats, iron frame. Nothing remarkable, nothing special, just a place to sit. Over the decades, thousands of people rested here, ate lunch, read newspapers, watched their children play. Most conversations were forgettable. Weather, work, plans for dinner. But some conversations, some moments, the bench remembers those differently. Because some people didn't come here to rest. They came here to speak truth, to say what couldn't stay unsaid. The park workers noticed over the years. This bench was different. People came here when they needed to talk. Really talk. Nobody knew why. Nobody planned it. It just happened. Maybe it was the location. Away from the main pass. Quiet. Private enough. Maybe it was the view. The pond. The reflection. Something calming about water. Or maybe the bench itself held something. Some understanding. Some permission to be honest. Whatever the reason, this bench became a place for difficult words, for hard truths, for goodbyes that changed everything. The tree grew. The paint on the bench faded and was repainted. The iron frame rusted and was replaced. But the bench stayed, in the same spot, under the same tree, waiting. The first conversation the bench truly remembers happened in 1915. A father brought his son here, early morning, before the park filled with people. The son was 18, maybe 19, young, too young for what was coming. Tomorrow he would leave for the war, enlisted, proud, ready to serve. His father had said nothing about it until now, supported the decision, smiled, pretended it was fine, but it wasn't fine. They sat on the bench, side by side, both looking at the pond, not at each other. The father wanted to say so many things, that he was terrified, that he couldn't lose his son. That war takes boys and returns ghosts, if it returns them at all. But he didn't say those things, because what good would it do? The decision was made. The train was booked. The son wanted to say things too. that he was scared, that he'd lied about his age, that he didn't feel ready. But he couldn't, because his father had raised him to be brave, to be a man, to do his duty. They sat in silence for a long time, minutes, maybe an hour, just breathing, just being together. Finally, the father spoke. 2 words. Come back. Not a wish, not a hope, a command, an order. The most important thing he'd ever said. The son nodded. Throat tight, eyes burning. I'll try. They sat a while longer, then stood, shook hands, because that's what men did. The son left the next day. The father came back to the bench every week, sat in the same spot, waited for news. When a telegram came 6 months later, the father returned to the bench one more time. He brought a knife, knelt down, reached underneath the seat, carved into the wood, came back. 1918. Then crossed out the date, carved the truth, 1915. Did not return. He never came back to the bench after that. Couldn't bear it. But the inscription remained, hidden underneath, where nobody could see. Years passed. The war ended. The world tried to heal. Then came the crash, the Great Depression. Everything collapsed. A woman brought her husband to the bench in 1932. Late afternoon. Gray, sky-threatening rain. They've been married 15 years. Built a life together. A home, savings, plans for the future. All of it was gone now. The bank had foreclosed. The savings had evaporated. Her husband's business had failed. They had nothing, less than nothing. They had debt they couldn't pay and a future they couldn't imagine. She'd kept it from him as long as she could, hoping things would turn around, hoping for a miracle. But there was no miracle coming. They sat on the bench. She told him everything. The numbers, the letters from the bank, the reality they were facing. He listened without speaking, staring at the pond, processing. She waited for him to be angry, to blame her, to walk away. She'd seen it happen to other families. Men who couldn't handle failure, who left their wives to face the consequences alone. She braced herself. He turned to her, took her hand. We'll start over. Just that. Simple. Certain. She started to cry. Relief, fear, gratitude, everything at once. They sat there until dark, talking quietly, making plans that felt impossible. Plans to survive, to rebuild, to try again. They had nothing, but they had each other. They did start over. It took years. It was hard, harder than anything they'd faced before. But they did it. Together. The woman returned to the bench once, decades later, after her husband had passed, after their children had grown. She sat alone, touched the wood, remembered the day she'd been so afraid, whispered, "Thank you for the bench, for the moment, for the truth that saved them." The 1950s brought a different kind of goodbye. A young couple came to the bench. Evening. Stars beginning to show. They'd been together for 2 years. In love. Planning a future. But her parents had found out, and they'd said no. Different religions, different backgrounds, different worlds that weren't supposed to touch. She was 20, still living at home, still dependent on their approval. They'd given her a choice, him or the family. She chose the family. Now she had to tell him. They sat on the bench, the place they'd first kissed, the place they'd talked about forever. She told him, voice breaking, tears she couldn't stop. He listened, numb, disbelieving. When she finished, he said what he'd planned to say, what he practiced. Run away with me, just the two of them. Start fresh, somewhere her parents couldn't reach, somewhere they could be free. She wanted to say yes. Every part of her wanted to say yes, but she couldn't. The fear was too strong, the guilt too heavy, the love for her family too deep. I can't. Two words that destroyed everything. He stood, looked at her, memorizing her face, knowing he'd never see her again. I understand. He didn't, but he said it anyway. He walked away. She stayed on the bench, watched him disappear into the darkness. She returned to that bench every year. On the anniversary of that night, alone. For 50 years she came back, sat in the same spot, remembered what she'd lost. She married someone else, had children, built a life her parents approved of. But part of her stayed on that bench, with him, in the moment before she said no. In the 1970s, a mother brought her daughter to the bench. The girl was 16, about to be 17, old enough to understand. The mother had been carrying this secret for 16 years, wanting to tell, afraid to tell. But secrets don't stay buried forever. They surface, one way or another. Better to control how, better to choose the moment. They sat on the bench, early morning, before school, before the day made it impossible. The mother had rehearsed this, planned every word, prepared for every reaction. But when the moment came, the words were different. You're adopted, blunt, simple, true. But you're mine. You've always been mine. You'll always be mine. The girl sat very still, processing, absorbing. The mother waited, heart pounding, terrified of losing her daughter, of breaking trust, of changing everything. The girl turned to her, calm, certain. I know. The mother blinked, confused. What? I've always known. I figured it out when I was little. The photos, the dates, it didn't add up. The mother stared. All those years of fear, of hiding, of protecting a secret that wasn't secret. Why didn't you say anything? The girl shrugged. You're still my mom. That never changed. The mother started crying. Relief, love, gratitude for this child who'd known and loved her anyway. They sat on the bench together, mother and daughter, not by blood, by choice, by love that transcended biology, by the truth that family is more than DNA. 1985 brought two friends to the bench. They'd known each other since childhood. 20 years of friendship, brothers in everything but blood. One of them had been in love the entire time, silently, secretly, hopelessly. He couldn't hide it anymore, couldn't pretend anymore, couldn't keep lying to his best friend. He asked to meet at the bench, their place, where they'd spent countless afternoons, talking about everything except this. They sat, the sun setting, the park emptying. "I need to tell you something." His friend waited, patient, trusting. "I'm in love with you. I have been for years. I'm sorry. I didn't want to ruin this, but I can't keep pretending." Silence, long, heavy, suffocating. His friend stared at the pond, processing, thinking, feeling. Finally, "I'm sorry. I can't." The words hung between them. Final, absolute. "I know. I just needed you to know." More silence. Then his friend's hand on his shoulder. Solid, present. "I'm still here." They sat together. The friendship changed. Awkward now. Complicated, but not broken. Over time, they found a new normal. Different, more honest. Still brothers. The confession didn't destroy them. It freed them. To be real. To be known. 2001. A young couple came to the bench. They've been trying for 3 years. 3 years of hope, of disappointment, of trying again. 3 pregnancies, 3 losses. The last one had broken something in her. Some fundamental belief that things would work out, that their story would have a happy ending. She couldn't try again, couldn't face another loss, couldn't keep hoping just to have hope destroyed. He wanted to keep trying, believe they could, that eventually it would happen. They came to the bench to talk, to really talk, about the future they might never have. She told him she was done, that she couldn't anymore, that her body and heart couldn't take it. He listened, heartbroken but understanding. "We could adopt." She shook her head. "I need to stop. I need to grieve what we lost, what we'll never have." He wanted to argue, to convince her, to find a solution. But he saw her face, saw the exhaustion, the pain, the desperate need to stop fighting. He took her hand. "You're enough. Just you, with or without children. You're enough." She cried. He cried. They held each other on the bench. Their story didn't get the ending they wanted, but they stayed together. Build a different life, different from the plan, but still worth living. The bench held that grief, that acceptance, that love that survived disappointment. 2015. A young man brought his grandmother to the bench. He was 18, just graduated, about to leave for college. But before he left, he needed to tell her, needed her to know the truth. She was 80, sharp, the one person in his family he trusted most. They sat on the bench. Afternoon, warm sun, people walking dogs in the distance. He'd rehearsed this, practiced, prepared for rejection, for disappointment, for loss. Grandma, I'm gay. The words hung in there, simple, terrifying, true. She didn't react immediately, just sat, breathing, thinking. He waited, heart pounding, preparing for the worst. She turned to him, took his hand. I know, sweetheart. I've always known. He stared at her. Chuck, you knew. A grandmother knows. I've been waiting for you to tell me when you were ready. You're not mad. She smiled, gentle, loving. I'm proud you told me. That takes courage. He started crying. Relief, joy. The weight of hiding lifted. They sat together, grandmother and grandson, joined by honesty, by acceptance, by love that didn't require him to be different. Does anyone else know? Not yet. I'll tell them when I'm ready. I'll be here. Whatever you need. They stayed on the bench for a long time, talking about his future, his fears, his hopes. The bench held that moment, that acceptance, that pride. Over the decades, park workers noticed something about this bench. People came here for important conversations, difficult moments, life-changing words. Nobody planned it. Nobody advertised it. It just happened. Frank, a groundskeeper who worked in the park for 30 years, saw it constantly. Couples having serious talks. Parents with children. Friends reconciling or saying goodbye. Always this bench. Never the others. He mentioned it once to his supervisor. There's something about that bench. People come here when they need to talk. His supervisor shrugged. It's got a good view. But it was more than that. Frank knew it. He'd seen too many tears, too many embraces, too many people walking away changed. The bench was old now, wood-weathered, iron frame rusty. Multiple times the city wanted to replace it. Frank always argued against it. This bench is fine. Leave it. Something made him protective of it. Some sense that it mattered. That it held something important. Once a woman asked him about it. Is there a story behind this bench? It feels significant. Frank thought about all the moments he'd witnessed, all the conversations he'd seen from a distance. I think a lot of stories happened here. A lot of important words got said. She nodded. Understood without understanding. Sat down. Waited for someone. prepared to say something that couldn't be unsaid. Frank walked away, gave her privacy, gave the bench space to do what it did, to hold truth, to witness change, to remember what people couldn't carry alone. The conversation happened slowly, carefully, with all the gentleness two people can manage when destroying something. He told the truth about his feelings, about the relationship, about what wasn't working. They cried, both of them, because endings hurt even when they're necessary. But they talked honestly, maybe for the first time, without pretending, without hiding. When it was over, when everything that needed to be said had been said, they sat in silence, not angry, not bitter, just sad, just honest. The person he'd been with stood up, wiped their eyes. Thank you for telling me, for not just disappearing. He nodded, throat tight. They walked away. He stayed on the bench, alone now, changed, different from who he'd been an hour ago. He thought about the inscriptions underneath, about adding his own, leaving proof that he'd been here, that he'd had the courage to speak. But he didn't need to carve anything. The bench knew. The bench had witnessed. His story was already part of its history, already woven into the wood, already remembered. He stood up, looked at the bench one last time, whispered, "Thank you," and walked away. The bench is still there, in the park, under the oak tree, facing the pond. The wood is old now, weathered by a century of seasons, smoothed by countless bodies, marked by time, but it stands, solid, present, waiting. The oak tree is massive now, its branches spread wide, providing shade in summer, shelter in rain. The pond still reflects the sky, still mirrors the faces of those who sit and look. And underneath the bench, hidden from casual view, the inscriptions remain, proof that courage isn't unique, that pain isn't new, that every difficult conversation has been had before, and will be had again. People still come to this bench, not knowing why, just drawn to it, feeling it's the right place for what needs to be said. They sit, they wait, they speak truth. Some inscriptions underneath are recent, added by those who needed to leave proof, to mark the moment, to join the history. Told her I'm leaving. 2023. Asked him to forgive me. 2024. Said goodbye to my dad here. 2024. The bench doesn't judge, doesn't comfort, doesn't offer solutions. It just exists, solid, constant, witnessing, holding space for truth, for pain, for courage, for goodbyes that change everything. The city has tried to replace it multiple times. The wood is old. The frame is rusted. It should be retired. But somehow it never happens. Something always stops it. Some understanding that this bench matters. That it holds something important. Something sacred. The history of a city isn't just in monuments and museums. It's in benches like this. In spaces where ordinary people faced extraordinary moments. Where fathers said goodbye to sons. Where wives confessed bankruptcy. Where lovers ended. Where mothers told truth. Where friends navigated love. Where couples grieved. Where grandchildren came out. Where people sat and summoned the courage to say what couldn't stay unsaid. The bench remembers all of it. The tears, the silences, the words that changed lives. It remembers because wood remembers. Because spaces hold memory. Because places witness truth. And because underneath, carved deep into wood that will last another century, are the messages. Proof that we're not alone. That our pain has been felt before. That courage is possible. That speaking truth, even when it hurts, even when it destroys, even when it changes everything, is worth it. The bench knows. The bench remembers. The bench waits for the next person who needs to sit, who needs to speak, who needs to be witnessed, for the next goodbye, the next confession, the next truth. The bench has been here for over 100 years. It will be here for 100 more. Solid, patient, remembering. Everyone who sat here and couldn't leave the same. E.N.D. 2024. The young man sat on the bench alone, waiting. He'd asked someone to meet him here. Someone important. Someone he needed to talk to. His hands shook. His heart raced. He'd rehearsed the words 100 times. But now sitting here, they felt wrong. Inadequate. Too small for what he needed to say. He was either about to end a relationship or save one. He wasn't sure which. Didn't know which he wanted. All he knew was he couldn't keep going like this. Couldn't keep pretending things were fine when they weren't. He checked his phone, dropped it, cursed, leaned down to pick it up, and saw something. Under the bench, carved into the wood, hidden from view unless you looked. Letters, words, deep grooves in old wood. He knelt down, got closer. Read. Jan, if you're reading this, you came here to say something you're afraid to say. So did I say it anyway? 1915. He stared at it. Confused. Moved. Connected to someone from a century ago. Someone who'd sat here. Scared. Needing to speak truth. He looked closer. Saw more inscriptions. Dozens of them. Different handwriting. Different years. Said goodbye here. Worst day of my life. 1952. Told the truth here. Lost everything. Worth it. 1973. She said no. I survived. 1989. Came out here. Still scared. Still free. 2003. Had the conversation I'd been avoiding. We stayed together. 2011. Broke his heart. Saved my life. 2018. Message after message. Year after year. People who'd sat here. Said hard things. Survived. He sat back on the bench. Overwhelmed. Understanding something fundamental. He wasn't alone. His pain wasn't unique. His fear wasn't new. People have been sitting here for over 100 years, saying things that hurt, things that needed to be said, and they survived. They carved their truth into the wood. They left proof. Footsteps behind him. He turned. The person he'd been waiting for. Walking toward the bench. Smiling. Unaware of what was coming. They sat down beside him. You okay? You sounded serious on the phone. He looked at them. At this person he cared about. At the relationship that wasn't working. At the truth that needed to be spoken. He thought about all the people who'd sat here before. All the courage it had taken. All the pain they'd faced. He thought about the inscriptions underneath. The proof that honesty was worth it. That truth, even painful truth, was better than silence. He took a breath. Yeah, I need to tell you something.